Thank you very much, and welcome back to our UMO Helsinki Jazz Orchestra trombone section instructional videos. And our first topic for this video is talking about plunger use in the big band. Of course, the most important thing is to throw it on the ground without it making a sound. That's a very important skill. You have to avoid that if there's a ballad, because I know vocalists get very upset if the sound of 4 trombone plungers landing on the ground during their wonderful ballad, it upsets them. But anyway, all kidding aside, what are some things to think about when the section is playing with plungers? Because, of course, that happens very often in traditional big band music.
Right. Well, of course, we could talk for a very long time about plunger technique and all the intricacies relating to it, how to get all kinds of sounds and timbres from a more soloistic point of view. But I'll just simplify it a bit for the section. I think the main thing is that each member of the section is doing the same thing. If you've got something like this where we have the same rhythms and we're all playing the same phrases, so make sure that you're opening the plunger at the same time. The amount that you close the plunger is whether it's half open, a third open, all the way full, or all the different levels that you can find with the plunger. Make sure you're doing it the same way. You're opening at the same speed. So here we're going closed, and we're slowly opening it up, and to fully open. All these things, again, you need to listen to the lead player, how he's doing it. There are many ways to play this, but that's kind of the most important point from as far as plunger technique in a section, I think.
Yeah, and of course, knowing maybe a little bit about the different styles of plunger playing in big bands, more of what we just heard was an excerpt from the Count Basie Orchestra, and of course maybe a difference between Count Basie plunger, sort of straight plunger style without a growl, and then maybe thinking about the Ellington Orchestra, where very often the plunger was accompanied with a growl or flutter sound, or sometimes combined with, of course, with a pixie mute. So some of these different concepts, but of course this comes back down to listening, to finding out and exploring the different styles between the different important jazz orchestras of the history. If it would be possible, so that everybody at home can observe your plunger technique again, I would like to ask you guys to play that excerpt one more time, please.
Right.
If that'd be great. Because once again, what we're talking about, what Kasper was just talking about, maybe somebody didn't catch it the first time through. So yeah, it'd be nice to hear it and see it again. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, And this is also, once again, just something to be aware of. And yeah, so let's maybe continue talking about, would you like to talk more about plunger, or want to move on to the next subject?
I'll just say a quick thing about plungers, and this goes for mutes in general. If you're playing a more melodic line, and this can be a bit tricky with the intonation, so that's another point to bear in mind when you use plungers. It can make the pitch flip a bit, so cutting a hole in your plunger helps. Maybe filling with a coin if you want that buzz in the plunger. But that's just another thing to bear in mind, because in more contemporary music, the plunger is also used a lot, and it's often just a half plunger. You just hold the half plunger and you get a certain tone, and that, in my experience, the plunger can often raise the pitch a little bit, just like the cup mute raises the pitch a little bit. So those are things that you might have to listen out for, and that also depends on the registers. So the higher you go, the more out of tune you might be with some of these mutes, like the plunger. So just bear that in mind if you're playing a more melodic thing with the rhythm, with like these sort of rhythmic phrases. It's not as much of an issue. But that's another thing to bear in mind when playing the plunger.
Playing the plunger, but once again, I think it leads us to a larger topic of intonation, because of course one of the things is what a lot of young players should be doing, in addition to working with a metronome to solidify your sense of time, but also working at home with a tuner to find out the idiosyncrasies of your instrument. Every instrument is a little different, and the instrument in general, the overtone series, the tendencies of the overtone series. But of course, you can even use your tuner to check the intonation of your mutes. I know it seems like a concept that maybe for some people is foreign, but definitely take your cup mute and work on intonation at home with your cup mute, because sometimes specific notes are more out of tune than other ones with a mute. And the things that Kasper is talking about with the plunger, of course, also just seeing the tendencies. Or the bucket mute. In contemporary big band music, the bucket mute is very important. And I just remember I've had several different bucket mutes during my career, and depending on the bucket mute, certain notes were suddenly much sharper, or a couple notes were even lower. So, checking out intonation with a tuning, with a tuner at home, but also checking out the intonation of your mutes. That would be something. And I think also then generally talking about intonation, because that will, as I mentioned, lead into the general topic of intonation. Those things you can do by yourself. But then in the section, to work on intonation. And the thing is when we're playing in the big band normally in the ensemble, because we're dealing with piano and other instruments, we are talking about well-tempered intonation. But when the trombone section plays alone, and especially triadic-based music, triads, major and minor triads, we can move over to natural intonation, which gives us it's just more naturally in tune. So why don't you take that and take it from there and talk a little bit about intonation.
Right, so as Ed mentioned, when you play triads, of course there's a lot you can go into intonation really deeply into it and all the finesses, but to begin with, I'd say the most important thing to bear in mind is if you are playing material that's melodic, or you're, say, sustaining chords for a longer piece, for longer time, bear in mind if you're playing the third that you might have to, and you probably will have to, adjust it. So if you're playing a major third in a chord, if it's a triad, even if it's a major 7 or a dominant 7 chord, it's good to lower it just a little bit. And conversely, if you're playing a minor chord, if you've got the triad, the third, you raise the third. So the third is something that you need to listen out for, and it's not always in the lead. It can be in second trombone, third trombone. Sometimes it's even at the bottom, depending on the inversion of the chord. So that's something that is good to develop an ear for. It may not come naturally if you're used to even tempered music, but the more orchestral music you listen to and the more orchestral playing you do, you will find that comes an integral part of playing in a section. And to demonstrate this, we've got a piece from Duke Ellington's orchestra. This is by Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn, and this is Half the Fun. And in this section here, where we start off, we are playing major triads, the three trombones, and I've got the major third, so I'm going to lower each one of those notes as we go along, as we move those major triads along like this.
Yeah, wonderful. And maybe one other thing to add is, another reason to learn about music theory and also work on your ear training so that you can very quickly ascertain which note of the chord you have. Because that's something when I work sometimes with young big bands, people can play their instruments, but sometimes they have a lack of theory knowledge. So I say, hey, lower the third. Sometimes people don't even know that they have the third. So once again, this is also part of just general musical education that everyone should invest some time in, ear training and theory knowledge.
Right. Actually, I think to begin with, we could just start by playing the first chord of that excerpt. We'll play a major triad, and I'll just try and play the major third in even even intonation, and then I'll lower it just a little bit. So hopefully you'll be able to hear how it all of a sudden warms up the sound and just makes it more full. So let's do that to begin with.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. Exactly. So hearing a triad in equal temperament and then natural intonation. And hopefully everyone can hear how the chord resonates better when Kasperi lowers that major third, the 13 cents, until it locks in. And another exercise that I love to do with trombone sections, if you're having a trombone section, is playing chorale music, church music, chorale music from Johann Sebastian Bach. There are a lot of nice arrangements for trombone quartets, and they are wonderful for working on intonation in the section. So that would also be something to think about when you're having a trombone sectional, not just working on your big band music, but maybe working on some classical repertoire, some Bach chorales, some things like that to address intonation. Because once again, this is just going to help your big band playing. So yeah, let's listen to some of this Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, Half the Fun. Very nice. Now, when you guys are, as a section, you're having a sectional rehearsal, how much time do you spend on these sorts of intonation exercises? Is it quite a bit of time or less, or is it more through playing? Please tell me a little bit about the rehearsal process.
I think it's very intuitive. We'll play until we stumble across a problem, and then we fix it there and then, hopefully. Again, there's so much in big band music. There's so many complex chords in jazz music, of course, in general. So it's not always as essential to be thinking about whether you're playing the 9th or the 11th or the 13th or the flat, fifth of a chord. But it becomes more apparent with the simpler chords and the longer notes. So if you're playing a long note, yes, it does need to be in tune. But when you're playing a more rhythmic or faster phrase, of course it's not quite as important. But that's the way we work at it. And again, the section rehearsals is a great. It's really, I think, the best place to work on intonation, because if you start doing that in an orchestral rehearsal, then you're going to be basically wasting the time of 9 or 10 other people. So that really doesn't belong in the orchestral rehearsal, in my opinion. If it's a sectional problem, so then maybe we stay on a bit later or figure it out by ourselves.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that insight. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, the UMO Helsinki Jazz Orchestra trombone section. Thank you.